Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. Please meet Ali and Ed from Valantis team, and as you know, today we are diving into Valantis bug bounty scope. We will break down the core points that will help you to understand the code base and find vulnerabilities in their bug bounty program. And if you are not aware, Valantis actually has a bug bounty program on the Remedy platform, so you should check it out after this meeting. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments section and guys will absolutely get back to you. I'm not talking anymore. The
Uh,
stage is yours, Jason.
All right, so let's get this started. Thanks, Valantis team, for coming up and providing all this really good info for auditors. Can you tell me a little bit about Valantis and Valantis Stex on a high level?
Sure. Um, so on Valantis, we've been around over 2 years ago, and the original mission has been we want to build DEXs. But the way we approached the problem was instead of just having a very concrete idea for a bonding curve or a mechanism and just going all in kind of like a monolithic way, we took a step back and we said, why don't we first think about what makes a DEX a DEX, split it down into components or modules, and first focus on the core protocol. And once that has been audited, figured out, and gives us a good mental model and baseline security assumptions, then we build the actual DEXs and products on top. So that's been our journey so far. We like Valantis core protocol, which it's going to be the first section of the talk. It has been audited over 1.5 years ago now, including by Hexens as well. Then we built several products on top, but like the most notable one, which we have live today, is called STEX, and STEX stands for Stake Exchange. And the way to think about it is not an AMM design or a product designed for all kinds of assets. Like this time we went very, very specific to address a pain point. And that pain point is mostly like understood in LSTs, for example. So an LST by definition, it has two properties. One is you can always mint it at a price given by a staking contract. It's usually the one-to-one exchange rate from the native asset. And you can unstake it like usually at 0 fee, depending on the protocol, but you can unstake it over like a window of 7 days, sometimes more. And that mostly depends on the properties of the network itself. On Hyperliquid, which is where we have the product live, this tends to be 7 to 9 days. But the problem for these assets is that what I just said can be reinterpreted as these assets, they have like a very clear way to be priced. So, and because of that fact, we thought that it didn't really make much sense if we just slapped an XY equals K to price these assets, because in order for you to see like why it's not very optimal, like for example, you know that in a Uniswap style AMM, the moment you do like a big sell order, as in you're swapping the LST against the pool, you will kind of like push both the bid and the ask price down in a sense. Like there's only one spot price and then you charge some fee around that. The problem is that the moment you do this large swap, there's an immediate arbitrage against the LPs where because you push the price of the LST below the fair value, someone can just buy it from the LPs at a discount and they can unstake it up to 7 days. And like if these bounds are not aligned, it just means that the pool is leaking value in a sense. So that was really the
Yeah.
starting point, is to say these are very specific problem, these specific class of assets. So whenever you have an asset that is redeemable for the underlying with a delay, and there's very clear pricing bounds, you should build something concrete for it. And Stex is that. And we currently have the product live for staked hype and K hype on Hyper AVM. And really the crux is like price these assets accordingly, which kind of means you will never buy the LST below what you get in the staking contracts. And when it comes to selling, here you have a lot more freedom, but the idea is you need to price the sales depending on a plethora of factors which a standalone smart contract can't really know. And like usually that depends on like secondary market volatility, on how much reserves do you currently have in the pool? Has there been anything critical flagged by in the LST core protocol or even the network itself? So that's where the one of the models in Valantis called the swap fee model comes in, because everything is a module. Without changing anything that I said about Stex and its key properties, you just decide how do I want to price these in a way that it gives best prices, but it still gives the best returns to my LPs. And we'll dive deeper later, but we have a model dedicated to pricing. And the final ingredient is sometimes when you have a big liquidity pool, it doesn't really make sense to keep all your assets in the same AMM, let's say. So probably you just want to lend them and put them to be utilized on more good passive source of yield within some bounds.
Yeah, you're basically just using your unused reserves for additional returns, additional profit. Can we talk about Valantis architecture just on a high level? Because I know you know, just ignoring Stex for a second.
Sure.
Let's go. You had shared this with me.
Yeah, I think that picture is probably the best way to summarize and give a mental model. So imagine that you as a developer, a protocol designer, you want to build, let's say, the analog of Open Zeppelin, but for Dexes. How would you go about the problem? You would really need to zoom out and look about, find kind of like common patterns between a lot of the monolithic AMMs and Dex designs that have been built over the years, and then try and find patterns that are common. So that's the approach we took in Valantis. So we started with kind of like a bullet point list that says, what is the list of requirements and properties and like degrees of variation that you want to have in a smart contract that exchanges tokens at fair value? And then crucially, like the first thing that you need to understand is what is the meaning of a price and how do you give quotes and price these assets together? So really the most important and the non-optional module that makes a Valantis pool a real thing is the one on the left bottom corner called the liquidity module. So Stex, as we will be explaining, is mainly a liquidity module with some extra submodules. But all you need to know about this contract is that it defines how to price the two assets, and it defines what it means to do a deposit or a withdrawal, and like to represent shares of ownership in the pool. Literally the most critical thing you need to have in a DEX. But the good thing about starting by abstracting away and subdividing everything into modules is that you come into something that we call the sovereign pool. So that would be like each time you want to build a very vanilla contract, like a small extension of ERC20 or like some contract that has a custom owner role, you never really build the basis from scratch. Like you go to Open Zeppelin, you inherit ERC20 something or ownable two-step, etc. Right? So this is our analog, but for the X's, and it all starts with a sovereign pool. So what it does is it acts as the glue for all of these modules, and without making too many constraining assumptions about the pricing logic, like you'll never see any XY equals K or bonding curve logic in a sovereign pool. It was not designed for that by definition. Mm-hmm. What you will see is a coherent way to link all of these role-specific models that you see in the picture. And so liquidity model is clearly the prime example here. But then, for example, let's talk about the swap fee module. You could, for most scenarios, you could include this module in the pricing module because price and the fee, they're kind of like related, right? But the key thing is they don't have to be. Like to give an example, and if you're just naturally curious about to see this point, if you go to the docs to the other section, there is one module called in design space called validly. It's the third. Yeah, that's the one. So this is really good to illustrate the point here and like the value of separating the fee logic from the rest of the contract is because that we took solidly AMM design with the stable swap invariant and the xy equals k, and with like just about 200 lines of code or like not much more than that, you can make a very modular version of solid that makes it a lot more powerful. Like for example, you take solidly as you know, you represent all of the invariant based logic and LP logic in a pricing module. But for the fee, instead of hard coding a constant value or like a constant fee tier that typically find in more traditional Uniswap like designs, you just go to Valantis and say, if I want like the pure fork of Solly, just put a swap fee model that always returns a constant fee. But if tomorrow you want to have something slightly better that is still like very resilient and decentralized, you just make a swap fee model that maybe takes some Oracle checkpoints and computes some volatility and some mean price estimate. And so just with a very small audit with very little security risks, you just made your original design 10x more powerful on the fly. So
interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you just kind of swap out modules whenever you want to. It's a very customized experience if you want it to be.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Okay. Is it just out of curiosity? I assume you guys have proxy and implementation contracts for all the modules. Is that correct?
Actually, we usually avoid that completely.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So
good to know.
We could have done it, and maybe there's some advantages having like an upgradable proxy pattern where maybe something goes wrong and you don't want to get the users to migrate. But in lines of like most DEXs, usually a DEX or an AMM, most of the times, not always, you have the luxury of like not baking in a proxy, because if you build a new version or like something happens, you just maybe there's a pause function or there's tell users to migrate. So what do we do is sovereign pool is completely immutable. You have some optionality to change specific roles or modules as you wish, but like by default we don't really do that. And we never take the upgradable proxy. Like the most that we usually do within the sovereign pool scope is we replace one address to the other, but of course you need to be aware of like breaking state changes if there's a migration. Worst case scenario, LPs would have to withdraw and move to another pool.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. What else is important for us if we're thinking about STEX in regards to the sovereign pool and the various modules that are associated with it? Have we covered everything?
Pretty much, yes. So there is a list of them. I don't really need to dive very deep because that would take us like in another direction class of products. Sure. The only two that we're going to need for STEX is the liquidity module. It deals with pricing plus LP logic and the minting of shares, and the swap fee module. Only those two.
Okay. Do we want to go to the next section, which is the Valantis core, or jump into the STEX?
I would just point out that like all of the modules and sovereign pool is thoroughly documented in the docs, and Valantis core has been around for a while, so you can check. I recommend you to check past audit vulnerabilities, like the code as is. Be very familiar with the sovereign pool, and that will give you a very good foundation to jump straight into STEX.
Okay. Very nice. And you'd be able to find the sovereign pool and the Valantis core repo.
Exactly.
For anybody who's watching, we'll post this in Discord too. Yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. On to STEX.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So they should really have all the information required for the scope of the bug bounty. you can already find some of the modules which we're going to dive straight into. There are like I think it's currently 4 reports, 2 by Hex and 2 from Zenith. They vary in scope because whilst we have built the base STEX contracts already in March, then we kept adding new sub modules. Like for example, we have a more recent stepwise fee module there, like an upgrade, an improvement on our previous pricing logic. And for example, we first launched the STEX pool for stake type, but then K-Hype got launched, so we built another pool. So you can really expect that as we build more pools, and if they are really deemed to be very mission critical contracts, we would be upgrading the bug bounty alongside the public repo.
Okay, so anybody's watching, obviously there's a whole audits folder. Check it out. Probably give you a lot of good insight and familiarity into the repo before you start deep diving into it. I would assume the biggest contract that has the most logic is going to be the STEX AMM contract.
Yeah, definitely. So really, like once you are familiar with sovereign pool, most of the interesting stuff will happen in the STEX AMM contract. This contract, if you look down the interfaces, you will see that the STEX AMM interface implements the iSovereign ALM interface, which is the liquidity module that gets attached to the sovereign pool. So it needs to comply to the Valantis standard always, anything we build. And so here what you have, if we scroll down a bit, like, yeah, so you really find the familiar functions that you can find in a protocol. Like there's going to be a deposit function, of course, a withdraw. You won't really find a swap function because all the swaps are initiated through the sovereign pool. So there's only going to be a smaller function called get liquidity quote, which it doesn't deal with transfers, not complicated things. It's just straight to the point pricing the 2 assets and giving the quote.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess we can go straight into the STEX AMM contract. I think what we can do now is I will like broadly describe the 3 main functionalities you might care about this contract. It also contains the most important variants, which is which functions get called during the swap and why they look like that, and then going for the deposit. And the more complicated one of the 3 will be the withdraw. There's more branches to discuss there.
Okay.
So if we scroll down just a bit, it's going to be a function called get swap fee in bips. I believe that's the name. Yeah, get swap fee in bips. So this function called get amount out. This is you can think of this as the summary of how swaps are represented. It's like, for example, when we have aggregators integrating with the pool, we just point them to say, if you want to estimate a quote before a swap, just call this function. And it mimics what you'd have in the most important parts of the execution path in the sovereign pool, without the most important checks, of course. But at the end of the day, what the Valantis pattern is check like 0 values, which you already have in line 246. And once that's good to go, the first thing that you always do is you call the swap fee module and you say, look, I haven't yet calculated the actual price of my quote. But if there is a swap fee module specified by the pool, I want to know, like, is this fee constant? Is it dynamic? Like, how much should I charge? So that's why you see, like, at the very least, we're passing in like what's the input token for the swap. Is it a swap or not? And we're getting a value back, which is the fee. And here's a very counterintuitive point, which I think is worth addressing. This one gets a lot of questions on. So let's look at line 255. That's a very confusing line. The reason some of you might find this confusing, and even ourselves in the beginning, is that when you think of a swap fee, Like if I tell you this swap will charge 1% of the input amount, like the common language and common sense says that you're basically taking an amount of value multiplying by 1%, right? That's not what's happening here, though. What's happening here is actually you are taking the value of bips, which is just a 10,000 constant, and you're like multiplying by a factor that looks different. So why does the sovereign pool do that? There's a bit of a nuanced reason, but it has to do with the fact that in this swap, like swaps in Valantis, they're always like with a fixed amount. Like you can never trade above amount in. There's not an option for exact amount out necessarily. And so what it means is because you haven't called the STEX AMM contract, the one that actually gives you the price after you estimated the fee, because you haven't done that yet, the swap fee model doesn't know what will be the exchange rate, right? So, and because we can also have partial fills, we need to have a way where whatever gets charged in the swap fee module plus what gets charged in the liquidity module, it can never exceed amount in. So this is a parameterization that gives us exactly that. But really the confusing part of this line is that swap fee in bips in sovereign pool language is different from common sense. You need to interpret as a factor that plays into the division formula that you see in this line. It's not as a multiplier. So then when you get to audit and look into the fee modules, you will always notice a magic line which seems very strange and has a pretty lengthy comment. That's basically to make the transformation from what we think is common sense to what a sovereign pool needs. You can convert from one to the next as long as the swap fee does not exceed 100%. But yeah, this is something worth paying attention to and going through the docs and examples.
Okay, good to know.
Cool. So most of the hard work has been done by now because the nice thing about Stex is like most of the pricing logic. So first, because we're talking about LSTs, and we always want, when the swap is to buy the LST and provide a native token, you never charge a fee. Like that fee will be always zero, as you will see from the concrete swap fee model implementations. And that's simply to say that we will charge whatever the LST protocol also charges, zero fee. And then, of course, if you're trying to sell the LST, that's where the LPs need to be compensated for the time value. So then you charge whatever fee given by the swap fee model, which is dynamic. So after you're done, you get an amount in without fee, and the conversion between what's left and what needs to be exchanged to the other token, it's given by these two functions. So depending on the direction, you call withdrawal module. Either you convert to token one, like to the output token, or vice versa. And here, this already implies that for an LST protocol like staked hype and K hype, this will be something that we entrust and delegate to the other contracts. Like by design, we take their staking contracts. Every LST protocol has a notion of an exchange rate. We quote whatever value it says, and we assume that to be like the correct ask price to buy the LST. So when fee is zero and you get an exchange rate, it's like it's like as if you're minting the LST. Instead of going to the staking protocol, you come to the pool. When you're selling, you first apply a fee, which could grow quite large if there's mass desperation in the market to sell the LST. But then you still look at the fair exchange rate in the contract. Like for example, if there's already slashing being registered or like something crazy going on in the LST protocol, it could actually be reflected in the exchange rate here as well. We assume that to be the fair value between the two assets.
All right, so there's a dependency there. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how you estimate a swap. To actually know how it gets executed with the state rotating functions, go through the sovereign pool. You will see that there's a swap function, calls the swap fee module, and then calls the liquidity module, does transfer, update states, like as clean as it can be. So yeah, that's exactly the one. it is a bit verbose because like in this case, we don't need the 8 or 9 modules that you saw in the picture. So a lot of them would actually get skipped in the computation.
Okay.
So with the swap in mind, now we could actually take a look at the deposit function. Okay, so this function, like, so STEX AMM contract, as explained earlier, is the one that deals with the representation and tokenization of the position, which is fungible, is just a standard ERC20 LP token. And so the deposit function, you find a lot of params that you would expect when depositing on any DEX in general. So the most crucial thing to know here, like I would say, starts on line 504. No, actually, there's in line 496. The line might not seem like much, but it's one of the most critical things in the system. So we will dive deeper in the withdrawal module, like maybe a couple of minutes later. But just so you know, the withdrawal module is the thing that separates the pricing logic and Stex as a standalone pricing engine from how does the LST protocol look like. Like LST protocols can look very different. And Stex is not even constrained to just LST protocols. Like you could have any yield-bearing asset like SUSD paired against USD, or anything which could look very, very different, could have fees, could have a different withdrawal queue, etc. So all of that will be delegated to a withdrawal module. And a very crucial.
Right now, you
Sorry?
guys just have. Sorry. Right now, you guys just have LSTs in your pool. You guys haven't branched out beyond that, correct? Or,
Yeah. So currently we have these two LST lives, but stay tuned for some announcements. There might be something new in a few weeks.
Okay.
So this update function, like we're not at the stage to discuss it internally, but the one thing you need to know is that it will, before it initiates any deposit, it will call the LST protocol and it will look at balances and say, look, from the unstakes that I've done before, have I gotten anything processed? Like, is there net new balances that need to be accounted to the pool and sent back to or reconciliated against LPs? So there will be quite a few state variables changing in the process. And for example, if no one withdrew funds and the unstaking happened, then this update function will actually cause all of the native tokens reserves to be sent back to the pool. So at this stage, you would expect like the TVL invariant of the system, like you would have like change values.
Okay.
So then after you initialize the pool, we go into line 504, and really what are you doing here in this scope is you're calculating the TVL of the system. But the key thing to understand is that TVL here, it's not just measuring token 0 and token 1 balances, in the pool. It's like, because of this more complex design, you could have it breaks down into 3 or 4 components, right? So one is current liquid reserves that are in the pool right now and available to swap, a reserve 0, and that's reserve 1. But also you have things like how much is in the lending protocol. So there's a module called the lending module. You will be able to find in a repo. And basically what it does is some keep a role in the system. It's able to take a portion of the native tokens reserves and lend it on, HyperFi, Hyperlend, and a bunch of the HyperVM lending projects to earn extra yield. But that also needs to be accounted, right? So as you can expect, the sum of that will definitely need to be included in the TVL of the system if you want to be accurate with calculating the correct shares of ownership of the pool. So that's really what line 513, 514 are doing. The TVL here is what you have of token 1 in the pool, which is the native token, let's say wrap type, plus the wrap type that is currently in a lending protocol. And this balance can grow over time because in some protocols you earn the yield in real time. Plus the reserve 0 total, which is, so this one has more components, which is the reserve zero liquid that we have in the pool, hence the LST that is available to trade, plus what is currently has been put through the withdrawal queue, but has not been processed by the LST because it can take 7 to 9 days, right? Minus
Right.
what has already been withdrawn by previous LPs, but they might not have even be fulfilled. Like there is some pending state here where if you come to Stex and as an LP and you want to withdraw, the option that usually gives you the best price is a delayed withdrawal. As in you burn your LP tokens, but then you register a receipt that says, in case there are funds in transit which are pending from the LST protocol, give me the correct portion whenever that's processed and gets back to the pool. So that's why you have to deduct that from the TVL of the system. And once you have the TVL, then deposit function is very straightforward. You know the correct shares of ownership from the depositor. You mint LP tokens. You send the funds to the sovereign pool, which in here will always be the location of the liquid reserves, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Very informative. Very, very helpful too. Okay. What else do we really want to focus on within the STEX AMM contract?
I would say the withdrawal, like I chose things in like granular levels of nuance. So this one will definitely be the more nuanced. But I'll just try to go through the most important points here.
Sure.
So the withdrawal is the LPs coming in to burn LP tokens, and there needs to be a way to return the fair value. And the way both pools that we have live are designed, stake type and G-Hype AMM, what happens is you have two ways of withdrawing, just so you understand like the different branches that can occur here. One is like, it's called an instant withdrawal, and that's why you see like a Boolean as an argument there. So an instant withdrawal is more like a convenient solution that say, if you want to withdraw from the pool and you're really in a rush, you can pay a fee to do so. The fee will be determined by whatever the fee module says it should be at its current point in time. But the caveat is this would only work if there's enough reserves of the native token to honor that swap. Like for example, if you're like a big whale in the pool, you own a huge share. Maybe your position will be worth $100,000, but maybe there's only 50K to withdraw. So this action will revert. It's not always available. It's typically in stretch situations, it's not available, and you have to choose the other option. So that's why you see some difference, because in instant withdrawal, as you look into the scope, it's almost like looking at the amount of LST that is owed to the user, pricing that as almost if it were a swap with some caveats, and return that as the token want to be given. Amount zero gets set as zero because you're not returning LST. It's all like swap to the native token. And then at the end, you settle the transfer to the user. If this doesn't work for whatever reason, there will be a revert somewhere there, usually in the sovereign pool.
Okay.
What else? Yeah, so same story here. So line 576, update all accounting that needs to get settled before you continue. That's the update function of what it does. Measure pool reserves, measure the total shares of the pool at the moment. Then the first branch, like you'll definitely to read the comments and the docs. But basically what it does is, so the pool can move funds in various different ways, as you saw. And one of the things it can also do is it can actually stake. So for example, if you have excess native token in the pool, and let's say that it's a pretty quiet market, like maybe you're not getting a lot of volume, it's actually beneficial for the pool and the LPs to just earn the close to the staking yield. As in, you make the sacrifice that you don't have as much liquidity available for swaps, but you're earning this something close to the staking yield. But the thing is, as you change the reserves from like what's in staking, what's currently in transit, minus what has been withdrawn, you need to be very careful with the accounting, because depending on which branch you fall into, there might be an equivalent deduction needs to be made to the total, or there might need to be a surplus that you need to consider. So that's why you see like amount zero and amount zero deduction that need to be reconciled together. So these branches is the bulk of the accounting, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that would probably interest me quite a bit if I was auditing this and looking at it.
Definitely.
Trying to look for any sort of vulnerability. If I would assume, do you guys have testing on this? I guess a general question is do you have unit tests?
We do.
Any fuzz tests? Okay. Okay, cool. Good to know. I'm a pretty big fuzz tester, so I think I would certainly start trying to figure out how to write some fuzz tests if none existed for this.
Yeah, definitely a good area of concern to look into.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that was the crux. Then once you've done all the accounting, you know exactly how much is owed. At the end, you do the settlement. You take the funds wherever they need to be taken.
All right, burning LP tokens. Okay. Withdrawing. Okay. Sending value. Okay. That originally looked quite big, but I think is pretty clear now. Just having listened to you and understand like what this function is doing. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. Again, everybody, this is all available. You can look at it on your own afterwards, and try to really dig into this. Anything else for the STEX AMM?
So the depending on how everyone is on time, I mean, one option is I could quickly go into one of the withdrawal modules. So we have one for stake type, one for K hype. I would just pick stake hype to go straight to the point because K hype has fees which are a bit more difficult to read. But besides that, I would also consider like if at this stage people have questions, so I would love to answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't see the Discord. Ellen, do you want to see if there's any questions in chat? She might be.
Why exactly does sovereign pool need to do this? The amount in without fee calculation in STEX AMM.sol.
It has to do with partial fills in general. So there are two pricing components here. One is, you know, the user is trying to exchange a total amount, let's say 10 ETH. You need to charge a fee in advance without knowing even how much the quoting module or the liquidity model is going to quote. Like, for example, if there's not enough reserves or like if arbitrarily decides, it could even like just decide to give a partial fill, right? But the thing is to get some consistency here, like one critical property is we want to make sure that the amount without fee plus the amount of the quoting module after the fee has been applied, the sum of the two, can never be greater than amount in. And the way we handle that is by using a different parameterization where it's based on division. So if you look at the structure of division here, you will see something like a factor of 1 divided by a factor of 1 plus whatever the swap fee model gives you. And whatever the swap fee model gives you can go up to 10,000, factor of 1, which means that the max swap fee that it can charge before moving forward with the other steps is 50%. So now you've taken away 50% of like the amount of the user, which will be just given to the LPs and no matter what, only up to the remaining 50% that you will apply some fair exchange rate without fees. If we do things in this way, then we know mathematically that the sum of both at the end will not exceed the original amount in. And it would also, crucially, will also handle partial fills. So you could have that the amount in returned by the pool could actually be a fraction of what a user intends to swap in the first place. For example, Uniswap v3 works like this.
Also, Sidik, if I'm reading this username right, asks to add medium severity bounty too. It's just a request.
Curious to hear why.
Why? At the moment, we have only critical and high severity bounty on Remedy platform. I guess he's asking for
Yeah,
like adding also medium.
it's something we haven't considered. Like, I guess it would depend on like what constitutes a medium, and if like the worst case scenario is deemed relevant enough for us to give a payout. That's mainly why I focus on critical and highs.
Yes, Sidik found two medium bugs on your platform on your program, and I guess he didn't get escalated. That's why.
Yeah, currently mediums are out of scope.
Yeah. Another question: since Valantis core is not explicitly in scope, but would you recommend getting a look on some parts of it will help?
Definitely. Because like the contract itself is not in scope because in isolation is well understood by us. It has been audited quite a few times. It has been the subject of previous products that have been very thoroughly audited. So for us, it's almost like an open Zeppelin, not for the world, but for us, the team. But of course, we're only humans, right? I mean, there might be a point where something very nuanced or like maybe a misjudgment in an interaction between the sovereign pool and stacks or a future module that could lead to a vulnerability. Definitely, that would be in scope. Anything that so anything that has very critical or high effects in stacks AMM and is excluded from the scope is acceptable.
Also, I wanted to mention that if you find a critical vulnerability in Hexen's audited scope, Hexen's adds a bonus reward to your bounty. Just consider that.
Yeah.
I think we don't have any more questions. Is there
Okay.
anything else you wanted
Well, I
to
will.
talk about?
Yeah, Ed, I'll leave it up to you if you want to take just a quick check into staked hype module, or if we want to call it a day.
I think we should be good. I mean, I cover the central parts, like the docs are quite verbose. You have a README, you have the code. So yeah, like if you find anything critical, if you want to reach out to us, like so if it's something critical, of course, follow the process, go through remedy. If it gets escalated, we'll see it and act immediately. If you're just more generally curious and like trying to get deeper into the project, just feel free to contact us on Twitter or the usual means like Discord.
Okay. Good to know. And obviously, again, guys, we'll just be posting all the links that we're looking at too on in the general channel once this talk is over with.
Yes. Okay then. Thank you everyone. Thank you for joining Valantis team. See you.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, everyone.
See you next time.
See you.
Thanks, guys.